Ba-da-ba-ba, ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101. 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 Promoter 101.
Hi, it's Marcy Allen, president of MAC Presents, and honored to be on Promoter 101.
Welcome to the show. As we're known on the street, Promoter 101 is the name. This is episode 46, and my special guest this week is the legendary manager, Jon Topper. Welcome to the show, Topper.
Glad to be on the show, Steiny. As you know, I really have nothing else to do. And what a solid lineup it is. We have Mike Luba, Jason Brandt Becca Leife, all join us to talk about the history and revival of Forest Hills Tennis Stadium in Queens. We are also joined by Artery Global's Trevor Swenson, who gives us a glimpse of the growing business. Plus, Paradigm's Jason Kupperman shares one of his favorite industry stories, plus the news of the week.
Hi, this is Bruce Solar from APA. I'm about to tell you some very, very secret stuff on Promoter 101.
We love the feedback we get from our listeners, but never more excited to hear from you than in person at a Promoter 101 live podcast recording. Catch us on tour at one of these fine cities.
Western Arts Alliance Conference in Seattle, Washington on Thursday, September 7th with the Triple Doors, Scott Ciampino, ICM Partners, Andrea Johnson, and NS2's Brian Penix.
The Berklee College of Music, Berklee's Popular Institute in Boston on Thursday, October 12th. We can now confirm Paradigm's own Todd Walker will be joining us in Beantown.
Beantown! The IEBA Conference in Nashville on Monday, October 16th. Get the hot chicken ready. We're coming, and we're keeping this guest a secret, but is it a big one? Indeed.
Keep up with us on Twitter. Dan is at the Jew, and the show is at Promoter 101. That's promoters, plural. I'm at JTop12.
If you have thoughts or feedbacks about the podcast, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email with your thoughts to steiny@promoter101.net. We'd love to hear from you, and we guarantee a response.
Be sure to subscribe to Promoter 101 wherever you podcast, and please help us spread the word by telling your friends.
If you missed any of the past podcasts, you can always catch up at promoter101.net. This week, we feature a reissue of Episode 6 featuring Sonic Entertainment's Louis Thomas. He's the manager of Great Big Sea, the Trailer Park Boys, and Matt Anderson. Also from UTA Nashville, Nick Minema. Plus, Emporium presents Promoter Rap. Rich Sellers talks about life on the road. If you haven't heard it, it's new to you.
Hi, this is John Scher from Metropolitan Entertainment Consultants and Promoter 101.
Let's talk about the news of the week. Up first, Canada. Changes are afoot. Paradigm is no hoser by grabbing Ziff and Countrymen. APA took Ralph and Jack. The U.S. is game on deep in the Great White North.
Love Jack and Ralph. Stoked that they're back under the leadership of Steve Martin at APA. Happy for Adam and Ziff. Paradigm is really got something good going on. You got to wonder what's going on with the International Man of Mystery, though. Zed is yet to announce what's going on with him, and dude, what's the deal? Give us a call at Promoter 101 and tell us the news, Zed. Where the hell are you going? You're way too young to give it up this early.
One of the great guys in the business is back. Mass Concerts. John Peters returns with a revamped Worcester Palladium.
Katy Perry has postponed the launch of her Witness Tour. Celebrity Access is reporting the pop queen Katy Perry has been forced to postpone the launch of her tour. Now, this is interesting because the irony is she's done a credit card commercial that's airing currently with the same current issues with production delays. Life imitating art.
IQ is reporting Ticketmaster officially launches in Switzerland.
So the big news for me is that the Eagles have somehow backed themselves into a tour. First, they announced they were just doing the classic East and West in New York and LA. Then they add Seattle in as the classic Northwest. And now they've added a handful more, like 4 or 5 more shows. Without ever really talking about it, somehow the Eagles pretty much did a full tour this year.
Dan, I saw you were hiring in the Denver Emporium office.
Why, yes, John, we are. Turns out Emporium Denver is looking for someone, and if you're interested in the gig in the marketing field, please send us a resume to steiny@emporiumpresents.com. We'd love to have you on board. And finally this week, I want to take a moment to shine a spotlight on APA's Craig Newman as Promoter 101's Badass of the Week. He's possibly the nicest person in the industry. He's always a pleasure to both work with and hang out with, and He's a badass. Not to mention, he wrote the theme song to this podcast that he calls Tongue Baths. So please give it up for Craig Newman. Congrats to Craigie Fresh, the badass of the week from Promoter 101. Thanks, Craigie.
Hey, this is Sean Healy of Sean Healy Presents and WeBookBands.com. Happy to be here on Promoter 101.
When you talk about the new major venues, the Forest Hill Stadium in Queens tops everyone's list. Dan visited with Mike Luba, Jason Brandt, and Becca Leife at the legendary site to hear all about the history and how the revival came about.
We are at Forest Hills, and I'm joined with the masterminds behind this thing. Thanks for taking time, guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Becca, Jeff, Mike, can you tell us how this came to be? Because opening up a tennis court and turning it into a shed in the biggest market in the country, and like it working just seems like such a far-fetched idea, and yet everybody wants to play here now.
Well, it wasn't actually our idea. There's great, along with the incredible tennis history, there's also epic rock and roll history. I think our mission here has mostly been just to kind of bring back to life what once was, because it was a super special place for a very long time and then kind of got forgotten about and abandoned, and it's gotten in its bones, so we're doing our best to just let the place do what the place is meant to do.
You're talking about the history of like Two Nights of the Beatles and Simon and Garfunkel and things like Streisand all being here in the past.
Yeah, for sure. It's arguable that the last great talking head shows in New York were here. Like you said, the doors open for Simon and Garfunkel, The Who, The Stones, The Beatles, Woody Allen opening for Count Basie, one after another. So once it went dark, again, it wasn't a genius idea to do it. We knew it was possible. It was just a question of how to do it and how to make it happen.
Okay, so here's this amazing property, Left for Dead, and I just took the tour, and it's fascinating because the history involved with this is like no other. For no other reason, just for history's sake, this place should have been brought back to life. But the fact that it's a working, financially successful concept that acts love being at and fans are killing for, like, it's amazing it didn't pop up sooner, that it was Left for Dead and like it was just sitting there waiting for somebody to grab.
I mean, I personally think the magic of the space is the fan experience on the floor, and I think that's possibly what Luba was referring to a bit earlier, is just it was designed for this. It was built in the 20s, before there was amplified sound, before all those things. So every seat should be able to hear an umpire making a line call. So the acoustics are amazing. The vibe is amazing. When that's converted into a music experience, and I'm not just blowing smoke, I think it's one of the greatest live floors out there. It's an amazing experience, and the key is to kind of get out of the way, make it a modern, gracious, concert-going, a great event in a day, but really hone into what it does so well on its own, not get in the way of it.
Well, let's take a second, Jeff, and talk about how you got involved. I mean, you came from a different world. You were in fashion, right?
Yeah. I started in theater and dance, but on the technical lighting design end of it, and moved over into fashion, did a lot of fashion production, produced Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week in the city for about 7.5 years here. And then through a sort of a very strange, surreptitious fall of events, ended up with these guys and walked into a space that, frankly, at the time was falling apart and really rough around the edges. But the bones were so solid, I didn't tell them, but before that first conversation was over, before my first walkthrough, I was in love with the place. And like the challenge of taking this and bringing it back and making it, kind of unwrapping it, bringing it back to what it was, but then pumping it up and making it something even a little more. Huge challenge, huge opportunity, and like financials, money, all that aside, something I couldn't not do. It was the coolest place in the world.
Okay, and unwrapping it seems like a good way to describe it, because Becca, from the understanding that I've got, is every couple feet that you guys discover something new here. The history is just deep if you can get under it.
Yeah, it's very true. When we first opened, most of around the bowl was covered. We just put scrim in front of it and hoped people didn't notice. And every season, we've uncovered more and more special places, such as the speakeasies. We've built more and more every year. So it's cool to just realize the history of what's here and just make it better every year.
I don't want to give up too many secrets to the industry. You're going to have to find those on your own. But each speakeasy has an amazing view of the stage, and they have their own vibe and theme.
Yeah, each one has a unique personality and kind of represents the history of the venue. We have one room called the sign room that is actually where the sign painter from the US Open would hand paint every sign as people moved through the tournament. And we've paid homage to what the room used to be by using actual archival signs in the room, and we like to create personality in each room. They're all unique.
You guys were saying he actually lived in that room unbeknownst to the world for 40 years, right?
I mean, that's what we tell everyone. We definitely found a cot, and for sure there was some sort of creepy habitating thing going on.
Yeah, well, and the crazy thing about it was, as she said, it's the signs. So when someone was on the first round of the tournament, they're out in the periphery, and they have this little 4-inch high name sign on the scoreboard. But as they move into the third round or the fourth round, they're going to bigger sort of tennis courts, bigger areas. So you'd see the same sign repeated up, and the more often it appeared, the better the player. And when we found it, there was still, 40, 50, 60 years of signs, all filed away, well organized by name, by number, and everything, just sitting in there. It was unwrapping the onion, peeling a layer back, putting enough back up for people to see, and kind of honoring it. And then, we blew out a wall and helped take that and what used to be the old first aid space and create one kind of nice hospitality space. So it's about honoring the past and creating the current experience.
And that current experience includes still working with the original tennis club that is still active in here, and you can see them around the site during a show.
Which adds to the whole surreal vibe of it, because, there's still this very sort of prim and proper, tennis white, civilized, almost like Great Gatsby vibe feel to these people playing tennis in the summer here, and then a full-blown rock and roll experience out front.
And center court, people still play at the club on off days, and even on show days, the court that's right behind the stage, people are playing up until the band goes on. So it's a pretty surreal experience for the band to have people playing tennis literally, right next to the artist dressing rooms up until their show.
It's probably got to be a welcome change, too, after they've been in all these barns across the country, coming from some of these older sheds and arenas around the country, even the nicer ones. It's like, this is a beautiful site. And even if you wanted to walk around the neighborhood, you couldn't find a nicer place to just put a concert experience in.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, what we've experienced now is for both the fans and the band. When you get to Forest Hills, universally, the first reaction is, what? And then, where the fuck am I? And is it really true I'm 14 minutes from Manhattan? And I'm 8 minutes from both LaGuardia and Kennedy, and Citi Field is 5 minutes up the road, and it feels like you're in the Twilight Zone. But the reality of it is, Queens, if Queens wasn't part of New York City, it would be the 5th or 6th largest city in America. So there's a very real population base here of tons of different ethnic groups, and there's real mega history here just of what it means to be someone who lives in Queens.
You're pretty much 20 minutes on the subway from anywhere.
Yeah. If you live in the Bronx, it's a little tricky to get out here. If you live in Jersey, it's a little tricky to get out here. But, I live on 30th and 7th in the city, so I live 2 blocks from Penn Station, and it takes me, if I time it right, I can leave my apartment, be in Penn Station in 2 minutes, and it's 14 minutes direct to the little hut where, Jason, Becca, and I sit all summer.
14 minutes. You got that timed well.
It's pretty good, yeah. And my other choice was to either walk into Times Square where the old office was before we finally got it together with the home team, with the Bowery guys, and moved into a new office there. But it'll take me 14 minutes to walk from 30th and 7th to 23rd and 6th, or I could hop on the train and out here where there's a giant pool and beautiful grass courts, and it's quiet and mellow.
Well, let's talk about the pool. As we walked in, you'd made a comment about Caddyshack, that it was Caddyshack X. And it's almost a reverse Caddyshack, because it's the prim and proper happening, and you guys are bringing the rock right dead in center, but it's welcome here.
Correct. I mean, the tennis club deserves a lot of credit in a lot of ways, in that before we came, for about a decade, they had been entertaining development proposals to basically sell off the whole back of the property. It's the largest privately held piece of property in Queens, which is owned by the 180, 200 members of the tennis club, who, when we first showed up, their average age was anywhere between 88 and 94.
That must have been an interesting pitch.
Yeah. So that was many, many, many meetings with lots of folks who, as I was sitting through the meetings, would have a very real feeling that these folks would be seeing me and hearing me, but would actually be visualizing like their grandson. And they're like, oh, he's such a good boy. He's trying to make music happen and not let them destroy our stadium. But to their credit, I think the last offer was for $140 million, $150 million to knock this thing down and put up what would have been an awful condominium. And the tennis club basically said, over our dead body, you're going to knock down the space where Althea Gibson and Arthur Ashe and Billie Jean King and John McEnroe and the Beatles and the Stones and the Who and, all that kind of credible stuff happened. Yet also to the club's credible, bizarre discredit, once the Open left in 1977, they just abandoned it. So this kind of weird blindness had set in where, if one of us walked in, you'd be like, what the hell is that thing? It looks like a complete war zone. But for the members of the club, they had looked at it for so long that I just don't think they even saw it anymore. And when we started with a handshake on one show.
Okay, so this is season 4, but year 1, is that the 4th year, or is that for the first show?
The first show was Mumford & Sons.
Is that technically year 1, or is it technically 5 years now? Would this be the 5th season if you count that as a season?
Yeah, this would be the 5th season if you count that one show as a season.
So the 5th year of shows out here.
Yeah, and it grew from, the first year, a bunch of us had spent that whole summer out with the Mumford camp doing the Gentlemen of the Road stuff where we would go into very, strange places. And so I think the band had a level of comfort that when we came up with crazy, ridiculous ideas that we had a shot at pulling it off. So 2 of the guys from Mumford & Sons are actually from Wimbledon, the town of Wimbledon. So that whole summer I kind of had been trying to pitch them on the idea of, there's this place in New York, it's the New York equivalent of Wimbledon. You guys should come play it. And being a schmuck, I've now figured it out. You would never, ever do a rock concert at Wimbledon. Where for sure you would do a rock concert at Forest Hills. But until the 2 guys from the band actually came out and saw it and then realized that it wasn't actually Wimbledon. It just happened to be
a tennis club,
where the U.S. Open was for 7 decades. That was in February or March, and they said, look, if you can get it ready, we'll come play in August. And that started a crazy sequence of all sorts of nutty things happening.
Okay, so one show with Mumford that first year, which is probably obviously a trial.
Yeah.
What would it be like?
That first show was, we were almost one and done with that. We did a whole bunch of work with the Department of Buildings here, and there's actually still the original sign up which says that the stadium can hold 17,000 people. So we sold about 16,000 tickets, and then as things go, we ended up with about 17,000 people. And at about 8:30, after the band had been on for about 45 minutes, it was obvious that it was too crowded, and people started backing down the stairways where they went to go to the bathroom or whatever it was and couldn't get back to their boyfriend or girlfriend or their husband or their wife. And it had that creepy, weird feeling of, this is not great. And at that point, Mumford & Sons, who's still there to this day, their production manager, a guy named Steve Gordon, previously had been Pearl Jam's production manager, known to either of us, had on the stage at Roskilde when all those kids got crushed. And there was a moment where we both were standing on stage and it had that feeling. And I went up to the chief of police for Queens, who was basically reading a newspaper backstage, Captain Tom Conforti, who is a totally amazing police officer and a Prince fanatic. He had Prince, Prince, tattooed on his knuckles. And anyway, I went up to
That's
him.
not where I thought you were going.
I went, hey, Chief, I'm not super comfortable what's happening here. You want me to get Marcus to stop? You want us to turn the lights on? And in one of the strangest moments of life, the dude looked me right in the eye and put his Prince hand on my shoulder and said, go with God. And I was like, go with God? What the fuck are you talking about? I don't want to go with God. Let's go with the New York City cops. And then in an interesting sociological experiment that night, we had the data for everyone who bought a ticket. So at 10:02, when the show was over, we sent a note to everyone who came to the show that night, which said, hey, if for any reason you didn't have a truly awesome time tonight, send us an email. We'll refund your money, no questions asked. And the first 300 emails that came in were people who were like, hey, I truly had a legitimately miserable time. I got separated from my wife, porta potty lines are too long, whatever. Miserable, truly bad concert experience, send me my money. And then from there, it went from like email 301 to 3,000. And the 3,000th email, we were getting emails like, well, I've been to 14 Mumford & Sons shows, and this was like my second favorite, and Ben Lovin wasn't as cute as he normally is. Thanks for sending my money back.
Committed to your word.
And in a lot of ways, I believe in my heart that actually enabled us to come back the next season, because I think the cops saw it, and the fire guys saw it, and the politicians all saw it, and they knew that we weren't here to be one and done. We were really vested in making it safe and getting it right. And that following year, we put seats in, we put aisles in, we bought a permanent stage. We really started the quest to make the place really safe and functional.
So from one show test balloon to how many shows that next year?
The next year we did 5, kind of classic conversation with Jay Marciano. I remember really clearly saying to him, look, we're going to aim to do 6 shows this summer. I was like, you'll never, ever do 6 shows here. And I was like, look, Don Sullivan and I will book 6 shows in our sleep. And sure enough, we booked 5.
Year 2 started to turn around. I guess technically year 3.
Still cashing in favors. We got to 9 shows that year.
But something was building, clearly.
Yeah, and now this year, we were technically, per our deal with the club, we were supposed to do 8, and we're going to do 16. And we now have more dates on hold than we actually have shows booked all this summer. So
the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, it's just that we finally have hit a point now where fans who have come and the bands who have played have all had a really good time. So we're able to go, the bands and agents and managers, and say, look, you don't have to listen to me call Zach Brown or call Van Morrison or call Bob Dylan or call Paul Simon or call the XX or call the Chainsmokers. And we've worked pretty hard to make sure that I don't think there's one band who's played here that we in good faith couldn't have the next band call and ask how it was.
Becca, there feels like there's a Al Capone's vault vibe to the property that you never know what else you're going to uncover. You guys found all of the mystery, or is there more to come, you think?
We actually have 2 vaults that we haven't opened that are from the original U.S. Open. We have no idea what's in them. So there are definitely still things to uncover. We're hoping, Jimmy Hoffa's body's in there or something groundbreaking. But
you seem like you could crack a safe.
One of the weird skills I picked up over the years was picking locks, and I've had to put that into use at least half a dozen times here to bust into
That's
a place.
a big vault, but I think you could do it.
Well, I think, we'll see. Everyone is hoping there's gold bullion or Jimmy Hoffa or something in there. My guess is it's a 50-year-old cheese sandwich, and that's about all that's in there. So we'll see.
Is there plans to open it?
I think we're coming up on a big anniversary for the stadium and the club pretty soon, so there's been plans floating around to crack it at that point and see what's happening. I just hope it's something super awesome in there.
Yeah, this summer in August is the 125th anniversary of the Westside Tennis Club being in existence. And they haven't missed a year. So when you go really think about it, this tennis club is one of New York's oldest continually operating institutions.
So does the inside of the vault, is that something that goes to you guys, or that stays with the tennis club?
That will stay with the tennis club for sure.
So what's the future hold for what is clearly now the Jewel of Queen?
In the big picture, we want to do things that make the space usable year-round. So plans to put a ice skating rink in the middle. Stadium itself is very conducive to a kind of, the end of October, kind of a haunted stadium type thing.
Oh, that's neat.
We think there's a whole winter village, really kind of community-based.
You and John Harper a chance to team up again?
Exactly.
Yeah, my goal is to really push us to 10 or 11 months of programming around the year, which for an outdoor space is tricky, but I think that there's some really amazing experiences still to be had here. It clearly works for tennis. It clearly works for rock and roll. I think there's more that can be magical here.
What does your normal concert season run from? Is that what, May to September, or how far do you go?
We started this year in May, and we're going through October.
Okay. That starts to get a little iffy towards the end of October in the city?
I think, oddly, October is safer than May. So I think as just the end of the world rapidly approaches, we will go further into October.
Our season's just getting
Start
longer.
later.
Global warming just means November shows for us.
Yeah.
Awesome. So season runs to the end of the year. You're obviously starting probably the program next year already.
Yeah.
Are you thinking more date, that trajectory going to continue out? Or is there a maximum number of shows?
Really, to be honest, the way we program it is, as you walked around, you saw some of the posters from the 1964, 1970. I think our goal from a programming side is that when we're gone, is that every year that poster happens, you look at it and it's all epic shows. So we don't have any mandate to hit any quota. We don't have to fill dates. We only want it to be, when you look back on it, that every single show could stand on its own as a legendary thing. Whether it's, brand new bands like, the kids from the Chainsmokers all the way up to Dolly Parton.
Yeah, you guys really are booking a diverse season. Dolly Parton and Chainsmokers, you can't really get too much further apart than that.
Yeah, it's by design. This season, we still have the kind of Groundhog's Day experience of people are still coming for the first time. So last weekend we did My Morning Jacket and Gary Clark, and it really felt like 80% of the people had never been here. Now at least they're starting to there's some peripheral awareness of it. But when they walk in, you can tell it's still their first time figuring it out. We've now connected enough dots, and enough people have been here that it will suddenly, whatever that critical mass moment is, where we're actually on people's radar. And when you say to them, hey, let's go see a show in Forest Hills, it's not completely confusing or you might as well go to Mars to go see a show.
Do you see that AEG's strength in the market that has definitely changed in the time that you've been with the company as they've really gained speed, but now that Bowery is part of that team, is that going to make that easier to fill bigger seasons as you've got this huge team that's not competing with you anymore as much as on the same team?
One would hope. I mean, those guys are friends and family for us for a long time, so I think they feel some vested pride and interest in seeing it succeed. So, yeah, like, it's nothing but great that that's happened for us.
So this venue and you are Madison House Presents.
Right.
Being part of AEG, clearly, but you guys have your own brand and you guys have your own mission. Does that give you the freedom to experiment in different ways, and how does that give you freedom?
Well, the great thing about the relationship with AEG is that we're able to take some big swings at things that possibly, if it was Luba and Sully and Jeremy, probably couldn't do. But they also give us tremendous freedom to really run it as we see it. Jason and Becca can talk more about the beauty of the process, which in a lot of times is a little involved and a little slow and a little meticulous. It's not as Wild West as maybe it feels, but we certainly get a very wide berth, at least on the programming side, to do whatever the hell we think is right.
But at the same time, you could just see it as this could be a full-time job out here at Forest Hills and nothing else. But you guys did most of the Chance the Rapper dates this year. There was some festival stuff. You guys are working all over the country with shows, and not just with Chance, but with a lot of things. Plus, you're still managing, too, with the String Shoe stuff. You're still heavily involved with that. It's a lot on your plate.
We have an office in Chicago, which Allison, who's our head of marketing, and Jeff Kicklighter, who's our head of production, and Don Sullivan are all based there. And then our main office is in Boulder. So that crew spends a tremendous amount of time kind of keeping our company running and producing Electric Forest. And then Becca, Jason, and I are kind of the New York crew, and we focus mostly on Forest Hills.
The Run DMC of the crew.
Exactly.
What's the future, Becca?
I'm just excited to be here. I started as an intern, and then they brought me on full time, and it's pretty amazing to see the venue change, but also just my role here expand and be able to be here year round and kind of see different parts of how a venue gets put together. So I'm just excited to see the future here and the future with the company and hang out with these guys every day.
Jason, what is that future as you see it?
I think we have a real shot at becoming one of, if not the premier outdoor live experiences in the world. Something that sounds really big to say now, but over 4 years, I've felt the magic out there. I've gotten a little more exposure to what else is going on there, and I think that this place has a real opportunity to do it right, to do it in a unique way, and everybody has a different focus, but from the patron experience to the band experience to how it functions within the community, I think there's a lot more in our favor here than is working against us, and we just got to catch that wind and keep it going. And, we've got some pretty good guys booking it, and the content leads as always, but I think we've got a pretty good frame with which to present the content.
Well, the industry certainly seems to have come on board and recognizes the coolness that has been uncovered here that you guys have found, and I think you've only got continued success. Thank you guys all so much for making time and being on Promoter 101. This is an amazing venue. Hats off to Madison House and AEG for doing the heavy lifting and bringing this historic venue back on the map.
Yo, this is Tommy Lee. Yeah, that T-Lee. And you're listening to Promoter 101. Fucking turn this shit up, bitches.
As it's the name of the show, let's go ahead and address Promoter 101's tweets of the week. When you were told it's your call, but you know it's not.
You can do anything you want so long as you do what I've already decided you're going to do. Man, ain't that the way of the business.
Oh, sure, I can show you what it looks like on paper in every venue in the free world. No prob.
I don't mind building offers, but if you could narrow it down to just a handful, that would be just a great help.
When a date with a high drama act finally plays out, only to wake up with an email with return avails.
You can pretend all you want that all of our clients are equal and we all love them the same, but you definitely have your favorites. And there are bands that you really fucking hate. And I don't want to name drop, but man, this act got dropped by an agent a couple years ago, and I was so excited to see him go, only for them to be picked up by another agent that we do a ton of business with that I couldn't not do the favor for.
When someone tries to commission their percentage on tax.
This seems to be an ethical gray area, but it's just a douche move to charge commission on tax.
When an act with one album puts out a greatest hits album as their second release.
It's really just a re-release of the first album if you only got one album out, right?
When a venue raises its facility maintenance fee to $5 a head.
I think this is starting to get out of hand now. I mean, $5 is a lot, especially considering we're already paying rent to these venues as a hard expense.
When you learn you are losing an employee you love.
I'm really sorry to see Jared Woods go. He's been an amazing part of the Emporium team, and we wish him the best of luck. Great guy.
That does it for Promoter 101 tweets. You can follow Dan at the Jew on Twitter.
Hi, this is Heath Miller.
Becca Leife.
Ed Mike Cohn.
Derek Dimmonstein.
Jason Kupperman.
Jason Miller. John Scher.
Marcia Flessick.
Mike Friedman. Ricardo Bacco.
Peter Schwartz.
Nick Storch.
I'm on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
I'm on Promoter 101.
We have a new segment on the show. It's called War Stories. And we really have a lot of cool stories from some of the industry pros that they've picked up along the way of their careers. And these are some of their favorites they want to share with our listeners.
This week, we are joined by Paradigm's Jason Kupperman, sharing one of his favorite industry stories.
All right. It's only fair. We're playing Turn the Tables once again. Jason Kupperman joined us for the interview. Now we're going to let you turn the tables on me. You got anything for me or Luke?
Yes, so this is one of my favorites. Whenever I spend time with people and really get to know them, I always ask them to tell me an industry story, like a war story, a happy story, something that's really stuck with them when somebody maybe not even in the music industry says, you know, has these thoughts of what it is we do. Like, what is one story that you've experienced, you've been a part of that really stands out to you?
One of my favorite stories, and I think you'll appreciate because I'm going to name drop the shit out of people. I was 20 years old, maybe, probably not even. And I was at Polestar one of the early years. And I was rooming with Corey Adams, who owned the Nile Theater in Arizona. And we didn't know very many people, but together we thought that would help. Like, we were friends and we'd exchange information, which people should definitely do if they're not already. But even back then when I was just starting, I found someone that was doing similar stuff that I was doing in Denver, and we'd trade info constantly. What are you paying Sky Cries Mary? And do you think it's worth something? Is Blink 182 like gonna it was just Blink then. It's like, are they ready to headline? You know, we would do these exchange things. So we were at Polestar and we were sharing a room because we couldn't afford a room on our own. And he had said, hey, John Wojs from Bill Silva's office just invited us to dinner. We should go. I was like, am I included? He's like, yeah, you can bring your roommate. It's fine. So John Wojs, who's now AEG San Diego, and we just thought it was Wojs, but it turned out that Bill Silva was hosting dinner at the Palm. And it was a lot of ICM, Wojs, and a couple of other people. So we were at dinner with Bill Silva. We jump in the car because Bill's driving. So it's Bill Silva in the car, Corey Adams, John Wojs, and this young agent coming up who just signed Jewel at ICM, Brian Greenbaum. And we're going over to meet Andy Summers and Shelley Shaw and Wojs and a couple other people. And we're at two different tables at the Palm. There was the kid table, which I was clearly at. And then there was the big kid table where Bill was hosting dinner. The place was packed. We're in LA and it's the Palm and it's happening. And then I get the menu in front of me. And it's like, I realize that I can't afford like anything on this menu. It's like, this is going to kill me. But I'm like schmoozing and hanging. And meanwhile, Brian Greenbaum, who's pissed that he's at the kid table, is ordering red and white wine and tells him to keep coming at every side on the menu. And then Corey's like, what should I get? His lobster says market price. What does that mean? He's like, oh, it's cheap. It's like at the supermarket. It's really cheap. You should get it. And he's like, okay. And I was like, that sounds wrong, Corey. And Brian's like, no, it's great. It's great. And then, you know, then there's just clearly the separation between the kid table and the adult. Shelley Shell had like, I think she had Guns N' Roses at that point, Shelley Shaw, and like Andy Summers had Green Day at that time. It was like, clearly there was separation of church and state. So Brian had talked Corey into ordering the lobster, and the waiter came around. He's like, we have a 3, we have a 4, and we have 1 7-pound lobster. And like, 7 pounds, that seems a lot. And he's like, no, it's just shell. It's just shell. It's good, and we'll all have a little. So Corey orders the 7-pound lobster at the Palm, and I order a small filet because it's like, I figure I can put it on my credit card, and I don't assume anyone else is paying for my dinner. It's just like, I'm lucky to be there. And we keep going. Brian orders every dessert on the menu for the table. Like, he's just running up the bill. And then the night comes to an end, and the bill shows up, and Bill grabs the bill, of course, because he was hosting dinner. And you can hear over the entire restaurant, who the fuck ordered the lobster? And Corey's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And the thing was the size of a Volkswagen, man. 7 pounds lobster is huge. And Corey's just like, oh my God. And Bill's like, don't worry about it. It's okay. And, we were heading over to the Dragonfly. No Effects was doing it unannounced. And we went into the Dragonfly, and on the way over, I was telling Bill the backstory of what happened. And he loved it. He thought that it was priceless. And Corey's like, let me write you a check when we get back to the hotel. I'm so sorry. I have no idea how much this lobster cost. But it is the best story ever because I saw Corey's face light up. And Bill Silva Presents did a ton of the cool shows at the Nile. Like, he needed him. And it was just like in this one moment, Brian had completely screwed Corey, but it turned out to be the funniest joke I had ever seen. But it took 4 hours of buildup through this epic dinner.
Great story.
All I was wondering was like, oh my God, can I afford the $60 filet that I have to pay for?
That's great. So it's my turn. Okay. So I was 3 months into working for Monterey Peninsula Artists, and it was the Thursday night, the eve of Good Friday. So the office was closed the next day. We were winding down. It was nice outside, typical Monterey, 65 degrees year round. And the old Monterey Peninsula Artists office was essentially a cottage. It was a home. And so the upstairs level was Dan and Fred, who shared an office and still to this day share an office. And then Jonathan. And then there was a back patio. There was a terrace. And a bunch of the people who were there went out onto the terrace, and we were sitting around the table talking. And Kelly came out with a couple of bottles of Chips wine, which, as I'm sure you could imagine, was very good wine. And we're just sitting there. We're just enjoying each other. And here 22, and I'm like, oh man, this is really great. And out walks Jonathan Levine, and he sits down at the head of the table, and he starts telling Grateful Dead stories. And I will never forget this one story because he would always say that a Grateful Dead show, it wasn't a show, it was an experience. It was an event. Every quote-unquote show was experience with, now you go to a show, 7 p.m. door, 8 p.m. show's over at 11. That wasn't this. And so essentially he's telling the story about how they're playing hours and hours, and everyone's dancing and everyone's doing extracurricular activities. And at one point they're spraying PCP into the crowd, and then they shut the lights off. The music goes off, and they shine a spotlight into the ceiling, and a man starts being lowered from the ceiling, and everyone's looking up going, is that Jesus? And it was Jerry Garcia. And then they served eggs, and I'm sitting there. They served eggs. Eggs. And I'm a 22-year-old kid being like, I made it. This is rock and roll.
I'm just trying to figure out how you expense back the eggs and the PCP. Does that go into settlement?
Truth be told, over time, that story's probably been altered a little bit.
So we'll have to get it from JL.
But moral of that story, well, one, I'll never forget just the people I was sitting with and the person sitting at the head of the table who had experienced these incredible moments. And that was just one of numerous, but somebody that I had an immense amount of respect for, taking the time to tell a bunch of us these stories and genuinely lovely. Like, he wanted to be there. He wanted to share that with us. But then there was also the feeling of, wow, however I ended up here, I'm here. And this is incredible. And I don't know how many times I tell that story a year, but it's a lot.
Well, I'm glad we got it, man. Thank you so much for being on Promoter 101.
Thank you for having me.
Jason Kupperman. Love Kupperman. He's going to be back on with a full interview shortly. Keep a lookout for that one.
Hi, this is Jake Sufnerowski from Rocks Off, New York City's sweetest independent concert promoter, and you're listening to Promoter 101.
Celebrating birthdays this week of August 21 to 27, 2017.
Monday, August 21st. Production manager to the stars, Stephen Gudis. TM, Gus Brandt, Donnie Frizzell, and promoter, Topher Christensen.
Tuesday, Adam Cook.
Wednesday, promoter Rick Bartolini, and Rose Presents, Randy Levy.
Thursday, Scott Kernahan and Live Nation's Billy Kahn.
On Friday, Jen Adams from C3 and Ron Enright.
Saturday, Cleveland's Chris Zitterbart, Josh Talley, Harry Levy, manager Shane Trolin.
Sunday, Agent Jamie Adler, Pulsar's Debbie Starr, and Agent to the Stars, Trip Brown.
And happy birthday to all of you who we might have missed, all from the gang and Promoter 101.
It's John Finberg from First Row Talent, and I'm on Promoter 101.
We're also joined by Artery Global's Trevor Swenson, who gives us a glimpse of his own growing business.
Promoter 101, Warp Tour starts tomorrow, and coming into town, all the big guys for the beginning of the tour. Trevor Swenson's joining me. Dude, thank you for coming by.
It's fun just being here, hanging out with you.
I'm excited about this one. You are in the heart of active rock, punk rock, alternative rock. Like, you are in it. Like, the day-to-day club scene, that's your world.
Yeah, we're specializing for sure into the 500 cap stuff and starting to get into a little bit bigger 1,000 cap rooms with some of our clients, but we're building the up-and-comers for the new tours.
All right, and you guys have a lot of acts. It's a pretty big roster. Your partnership is not like 2 acts like being booked out of a bedroom. You guys have got a full roster.
Yeah, we've got our U.S. office catering to, just under 300 bands right now, and then our UK office is probably about the same size.
Okay, and who's on Warp Tour that you're covering?
We've got CKY and William Control on the full tour, and then the East Coast run, we've got Lakeshore, and then we've got a couple bands popping in and off on regional dates.
Okay, and what's your day-to-day right now? Who are the bands that you're spending the most amount of time throughout your entire roster that you're focused on? Like this week, what's big for you?
I mean, my personal roster, we're looking at like CKY. They just came out of Canada, which sold out the majority of their Canadian dates. I know they just came back from Europe. They sold out their entire UK tour. I'm doing a lot of stuff with a new band called The Killer's Confession. It's got Waylon from Mushroomhead singing for them. Lorna Shore, they're doing a ton of stuff. They're doing Summer Slaughter. They just got off a headliner. I'm doing a lot of stuff for them in the fall. Necrogoblicon. I mean, I could go on and on. My calendar is huge. You know, we got Xandria coming back again and headlining their first ever headlining tour. Did amazing business for the club level touring that they did. It's like symphonic metal. It's like Nightwish, essentially the exact same band. So, but those fans, they buy tickets like crazy and they buy merchandise like crazy. So again, we're just trying to keep active with everybody, you know, with Xandria, and then I'm more trying to help my team as well. We've got a lot of young agents that are selling a ton of tour dates. We've got a couple agents that came over from other agencies that are doing it. So my day-to-day is pretty crazy with.
And you're doing this out of Sacramento. It's not like you're in the heart of LA. Like, it's a global business and the world works on the internet and the phone. So all you really need is a cell phone now, and you can run your agency from my living room, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you got your laptop and your cell phone, you're pretty much set wherever you go in the world. So
Sacramento is not exactly the middle of the entertainment mecca. We do a lot of shows there. It's a good market, don't get me wrong, but it's never been an A market in any sense of the term. I mean, it's not in Nashville, it's not New York, it's not LA, it's not Chicago, it's not Denver. So you guys are in the midst of your own world.
True, but you've got guys like Eric Rushing and Brett Baer who essentially are rebuilding the market now. Like, and then with the brand new edition of Golden One Center, you know, that just won every award on the planet.
Yeah, beautiful new arena.
Yeah, it's amazing. But like Ace of Spades, you know, now recently acquired by Live Nation. I mean, they're doing huge numbers there, you know, and Brett and Eric are still buying there. Plus, with the club level aspect things in San Francisco going kind of downhill, they only essentially have 3 venues that'll cover active rock, metal, stuff like that. The rest of it's all indie bars, you know, where it's either indie music that'll do like coffee house touring, or you're going to go play, you know, the big 1,500, you know, to, you know, 2,500 seat rooms. So Sacramento's kind of on the up and coming. So it's nice, like, you know, me and the staff members, like, we can go to all the shows and see all these guys in the club level that are, you know, coming up, or, you know, if people want a local showcase, then we have a jumping point too, where we can go to San Francisco, we can go to Reno, we can go to all these different areas, and or just jump on a flight down to LA, you know, which is an hour flight, and we're there. So
let's talk about this. Europe, you see a lot of agents, managers, promoters, they're all the same guy. It's not unique to see a Barry Dickens promoting his own artist in London. So in America, you see less and less of that. But you guys have dabbled in some of that world too, of mixing that up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the partnership that originally started with Artery Global was done with a management firm and with Eric Rushing, who had the management firm at the Artery Foundation. Then he also owns Artery Recordings, which is the record label that had it. Which, they've got a nice back catalog. I think they're an imprint of Razor and Tie and somebody else. I actually don't know a ton about the label.
Razor and Tie. So you guys are housed by the same people that handle Kids Bop. You
Pretty
gotta
much.
love that.
And then he signed bands like originally like Attila to it. So Kids Bop and Attila. So it goes together, right?
Whatever gets it done, baby.
Exactly. You kind of have to have a ton of hats in the music industry these days because it's tough to be one demographic and be able to make a proper income. So, with having an agency, having a management firm, having a record label, kind of has a one big in-house thing. And I think the biggest example of a one in-house company is like Strange Music. So, they've kind of perfected it with the whole Tech Nine thing. So, and
yeah, Madison House has done that very well too.
Yeah.
I think with String Cheese Incident.
Mhm.
Although I think that they were building off the Grateful Dead's early days of structure. So there's certainly something there to that synergy,
Mhm.
and you see more and more of that. And those guys have continued that with Madison House Presents and AEG, which Mike Luba's doing some amazing things with Don Sullivan.
all those companies are doing great things. It's just, but you definitely have to diversify to be able to grow your artist these days. It's tough to be the one-stop shop type of thing. So
Yeah, and it seems like rock is having a moment again where it's definitely fades and comes back as far as the genre.
Mhm.
Where active rock has its moments. You're seeing some of those radio stations formats change, and that I never thought that we'd lose AOR as a radio format. AAA has always been that thing where it comes and goes. Some
Mhm.
markets have it, some don't, and those are the markets where Bonnie Raitt's biggest.
Yeah.
But active rock, you would have thought that active rock would be around forever, but some of those stations have been changing formats the last couple of years. I don't think Portland even has an active rock station anymore. It's one of the biggest active rock markets that you can play when you're touring. It's a very odd thing.
I think, the active rock station actually closed, 3 years ago now in Portland?
Yeah, UFO's gone. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
weird thing. It's like, that's something you really pay attention to. And we're routing tours. That's a very odd thing. Bands will talk about playing a market like Eugene, which does have active rock radio, over Portland, which is a much bigger market. And it's a game changer, It's like when you're talking to bands like Hollywood Undead and they're like taking seriously playing Eugene over Portland.
Yeah.
It's an interesting concept. And we're just like, the fans are still there. It's a big city. The fans haven't gone away. The internet supports it. But it's this hard balance of, without the current radio station pushing it, how much does that affect an act breaking through?
True, but also you have to realize that there's not a ton of people listening to the radio anymore too. It's like everybody relies on streaming access now, and how you're
certainly in the active rock format, not in all formats.
correct. Active rock format, like active rock wise, your demographic for people actually listening to the radio,
Yeah, it's
are down.
heavier on classic rock,
Yep.
and country music still way
Country's
driven by
dominating
radio.
everything,
And
so.
certainly top 40 CHR is like
Mhm.
heavy on radio,
Mhm.
so it hasn't completely gone away. But yeah, Spotify and Pandora have certainly cut into radio's numbers, and you can see it with iHeart's book this year. Like, they are in trouble.
Well, iHeart's been suffering for a while, right? For about 2 years.
Yeah, the bankruptcy numbers and rumors and, those things are a brew, and that's a scary thing because that's a really big company.
But iHeart's technically, from my knowledge of it, is iHeart's capitalizing on the retro stuff, like the 80s and 90s comeback stuff where, the iHeart 80s channels, and then even the festivals are throwing the iHeart 80s, iHeart 90s, where they're bringing back like people that are in their 30s that are spending money these days. They're appealing stronger to them than the kids that are coming up on.
Right, and it's the same thing when you've got those I Love the 90s tours with things like Vanilla Ice and Salt and Pepper touring again with Coolio and doing great numbers, or on a bigger level, the New Kids on the Block tour with Paula Abdul doing amazing arena business and shed business, just crushing it.
Mm-hmm.
Jared's done amazing business with that stuff because he's found the novelty of bringing people back to what they missed about their childhood.
Well, look at the Backstreet Boys in Vegas. They've sold out every single date in Vegas, and they just added another year to the book, I heard.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I'm hearing 98 Degrees is going to go back out too. So it's like...
So is O-Town.
Yeah, it's a big moment.
The Faculty is going to make some money this year.
Go Jared.
Yeah, those Faculty guys. They're good guys, though. So
Yeah, they got a good thing going on. They're involved with a couple of the acts we work with. We like those guys.
Yeah.
They know how to make money. I think Mitch Rose was talking recently on the pod. Actually, he was on the podcast this past week, and he was talking about that Jared had brought him the idea of putting New Kids on the Block back together, and they have never questioned him since.
Oh, I was at the show in Sacramento, and the arena was sold out. and like not like small sold out. Like
Oh, no, they did the Full House.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. The right publicist, the right manager, and the right moment just bring a windfall of cash. And, you know, it's a show. It's a real show. They've done a good job of making sure people leave happy so they can come back. And they've done that well. That wasn't a one-trick pony where they came in, did the reunion, took the money, and went away.
Mhm.
They brought it back. They keep packaging well. And it's funny because while I'm talking to you and pop is not necessarily your genre, the lesson of what Jared and faculty have done is build a show right, make the fans leave happy, give them good value, and then they'll come back. And that's a lesson for the industry in whole.
Oh, yeah. If it's done correctly at club level to arena level and the fans get the experience that they're paying for and they see the value in that, you know, that $25 ticket or they even the $125 ticket, then they're going to pay for it. And they're going to keep coming back even nostalgically over the years because that's what they've learned to love and they know that it's going to be a great show.
I think we've seen that in the active rock world with the radio shows, and we've also seen it in the packages in the past years. Bands like Slipknot and Slayer are very good at making sure they tour with solid packages, that they don't just come and bring two new baby acts, that they bring real support. And that seems like the 1+1 = 3 in this industry has always been something particularly solid in active rock.
True. I know the metal genre ran into some problems with the 1+1 scenario the last 2 years because, you know, like say if you pair two larger, you know, 500 cap room, 1,000 cap room acts, you think you're going to draw twice as many people with those two bigger bands. And essentially it's not necessarily true because you're drawing from the same pool. So, but in active rock, like if you have like a crossover band or like say if you have like a big headliner and you bring, you know, something that's slightly different but still a good solid band, then you'll bring in more fans. I mean, that's just my experience with it. So, but the other problem that you run into is development then. If you're going to bring in bands that are drawing powers, then how do you develop the babies, you know? Because the big packages don't give up those spots for the babies anymore.
The babies. Well, it's everybody wants to figure out how to break them, but nobody wants to do the work to do it.
Correct. That's why it's real easy for the record labels to throw out a 360 deal and throw shit at a wall and hopefully it sticks. And if it sticks, then they'll dump money into it for the second record. So,
well, I think it's a numbers game for a lot of us. It's not necessarily about throwing shit at the wall. It's just no matter how good something is, you just never know. And it's not always whether the audience liked it or not. Sometimes the artist doesn't have the right drive.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have all the working pieces and still the artist doesn't have the work ethic to get it out there because you have to really work even the best of projects because there's so much other stuff, so much white noise. You got to beat it out there.
Very true. And again, to add to that, besides having the work ethic, it's the songs. Like we talk about that a lot, you know, at Polestar and then like the other conferences. It's the songs. If you write great songs, usually they get through. But if you're a band that has like the look and, you know, you got stage presence, that's great. But if it's a bad song, then it's not going to catch. You know, the fan's not going to adapt to a really bad song. I think the only band that can write bad songs is Motley Crue.
And get away with it?
Yeah.
Whatever do you mean?
I love Motley Crue, don't get me wrong.
I do too, but I don't think there's been a good song since Dr. Feelgood. I think
Yeah.
that was the last album they dropped that had anything on there. So I think it's time to bring Doc McGee back and if they're going to do a reunion. Although I think they can't. I think they're not allowed to. They signed a contract with the fans.
The contract was that they couldn't ever tour as Motley Crue without everybody in the band. I think that's what the contract was.
So the contract basically says that they can reunite.
Yeah, they can reunite, but they can't tour as Motley Crue without every member of the band. I think
How hard
that's what
is that? They were all four of them were already there.
Well, yeah, but like, I mean, say if, you know, one of them dies or something like that, then I think they can never tour again. Who knows? It's a contract to just throw publicity out there.
Right. So they could tour as the Crew.
Yeah. You know, like, I mean, Vince Neil right now is singing every single Motley Crue song he can on his own tour.
I would argue that he's not really singing. You can call that singing, but that is not the Vince Neil on those records. That is some weak-ass shit.
I'm not going to comment on that one.
Tommy Lee is the show.
Tommy Lee is the show. I like Nikki, though. Nikki's great. Obviously,
Nikki can play. That is a solid band. They can play. It's just Vince's voice is not what it was.
True. I mean, he's in the 60s, right? Or he's 60 now?
You know.
He can't all be Mick Jagger, you know, or, you know, the Led Zeppelin guys. It can't be them. I mean, which if they would have reunited, that would have been fantastic. That was probably one of the few festivals that I tried to get on a waiting list for that one if that would have happened. So Desert Fest, where if they
Desert
would
Trip?
Oh, Desert Trip, yeah. Oh man, if Led Zeppelin would have did, I actually even called my family and said, if that happens, I'm flying all of you out there.
Been an expensive ticket. Although it's an interesting thing. It's the way the industry buzzed about that for the 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
I also found it really interesting too that Tollett didn't immediately say it's not happening.
Yeah.
It was almost as if there was a week where maybe it was, or maybe the publicity was like so good that maybe it was. It could have, maybe it was a rumor, but maybe it was like, shit, look at the attention.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, Paul is not that guy, but at the same time, I could totally see the genius that is AEG going, shit, why not? You know, it's just
absolutely.
like,
Yeah.
look at everybody being excited. Should we do this? And having a moment with them going, maybe, you know, and maybe that's what was going on before they came out and said, no, it's not going to happen. Maybe they ran it down when they saw how it blew up.
Well, it's like the only thing that could have topped last year's lineup, though. I mean, last year was like the biggest lineup you could ever conceive.
Which is an amazing lineup, and we've had the concept of who could do it. And, you know, it's like that question of you could bring U2 in, obviously. You know, it's like Eagles could have had that moment. Simon and Garfunkel, you could do Billy and Elton together. I mean, you need three. You need three solids. You know, a Clash would cut it.
Yeah, I don't know if they'd be a headliner, though, would they?
Yeah, but it's going to be about who's the person that they put in there singing.
True.
Talking Heads could do it. Smiths could do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think the fear would be that Morrissey would cancel.
Probably.
But
because last year was man, who was it last year?
Last year was the Stones, McCartney,
Yep.
and you had Waters, and then support, which weren't real support. They're technically headliners. The Who, Dylan, and Neil Young.
Yeah. So every single one of them could headline arenas, but they want to all play in one big field together.
Right, and I think there was that thing of who's doing it. Once the Stones were on board, I think it got a whole lot easier. But they had to convince the Stones first. The Stones are the ones you had to get. But AEG does the Stones. Had to make it a little easier. I got to learn a lot about.
You know, switching gears a little bit on this is, what are your thoughts on these club level bands getting the look to be able to develop? I think Kevin Lyman touched on this last year with an article he did, where these club level bands are just never going to reach that shed level again, because it's tough to break those, like the rock bands. Like Five Finger Death Punch right now is like the biggest band you can possibly get to right now. I think they're doing arenas, not sheds, right?
I think rock bands work better in the arenas. I think a lot of them agree with that too, because you don't see Kiss playing a lot of amphitheaters. They've done it, but you see them leaning back to arenas whenever at all possible. Same thing with Motley Crue. Well, they could have been out playing sheds. They went back to the arenas. And over the course of their career, you saw that. The production looks better in the dark. You know, it's like if you got a band like Rush playing an amphitheater, you don't mind watching them with the sun go down. It's a little more melodic. It's a little more of a mellow show. That's cool. But when you're getting the fire going and the pyro and you're just ready to fucking bring it, it helps to be in the dark. It's like Reverend Horton Heat shouldn't be playing in the middle of the afternoon while it's light out. You know, you want to see them in a dark room. ZZ Top, you want to see them in the dark. It's like, that's what rock and roll is. It's dark and it's dirty. So you got bands like Five Finger Death Punch. Well, they can be playing on a stadium, which a lot of them are with those Metallica dates. You can see those bands outside because there's very few indoor stadiums. That stuff is more set up to play dark arenas that all of the lights can be controlled because the production just comes out better.
So then, essentially, what can be done to help these 500 cap, 1,000 cap artists get to that next step to get to those arenas? Like, essentially, is like, you know, obviously Five Finger Death Punch is the most recent success in the last 10 years, you know, and then you've got bands like Korn, those guys, but they've been around for about 20
and they're all
now.
trying to be Kiss.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So how do you get those bands, though, now in the rock world? You know, because if you have a breakout artist in hip-hop or R&B, they pop out and they go out, and those are the ones doing the arenas and sheds these days. But, like, how do you get the rock bands to break into those bigger markets like Five Finger did?
Well, I mean, I think with rock, it always started with the songs. whether it was radio and now even Pandora, Spotify, it's still about the songs. I mean, this is why Gwar was always the ballroom band. They never got bigger than that because nobody ever went home and listened to a fucking Gwar album.
Correct.
It's not a good band.
No, I know, but it's
Like,
you go for the show.
Well, Slipknot is basically Gwar that could write songs. I mean, they're a little harder and they're a little more progressive, but when you took the idea of Gwar, extrapolated that out, and then put real musicians behind it, because I'll listen to Slipknot at home.
Absolutely.
It's good shit.
Absolutely.
A good song is a good song. I've seen Gwar a lot. They are a fun show to see. But I have never, ever heard someone say, dude, throw in that Gwar track. It's got to start with a song.
Them Slay wasn't bad.
Yeah, you got. I mean, Brocky's been gone for a while now, but it's just like you've got one song in what, a 30-year span of a career for an act. It's like it was never about the music. It was always about making shit messy.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they are the Gallagher of metal.
Oh yeah.
But that's why they were limited to where they were at, because it was ballrooms. It was about the experience. It wasn't about the music. When it's about the music, you can go to the next level, which is why Slipknot becomes such a bigger band doing a very similar thing. They just did it much better. So there's a million singer-songwriters trying to be Jason Mraz and John Mayer, but they don't all have the pieces. You know, there are a million crooners trying to be Michael Bublé, but if you don't have the voice and you don't have the songs, it just doesn't matter. A lot of people trying to be Rod Stewart, but without the sex appeal that he brings, with the songs packaged to it, you can't do it. You need those things. Each one of them is, the gimmicks are great, but without the actual songs behind it, it's just a guy trying to be sexy. And there's sexy people everywhere. We live in a day and age where there's internet that can give you access to beautiful people 24/7.
Exactly.
So with that, people have seen it. It's got to be more. They want the legit good song. So with that, you start with the good song and then you add the gimmick, and the gimmick's got to be the ad. But at the end of the day, you see bands like the Struts and you're just like, it's pure rock and roll. It's great. The Hives, pure rock and roll. It starts with great. And from great, then you build on top. And I think every act in the world can agree that if your show's that good that no one wants to miss it, everything else will kind of fall in place. I mean, look at NoFX. They're possibly one of the more dysfunctional bands in the world, but they're great live.
Oh yeah, they're fantastic live.
I mean, I think Mike would be the first person to say they could have done it a whole lot more sleek and professional, but they were a party. They always wanted to be a party. They didn't want to be that. You know, it was never about being a corporate act. It was about being a party and having fun and being able to fuck around with it. And that made them one of the best party bands in the world. Call it punk rock, call it a party, whatever it was. It's always a good time, but it's just a little bit of a circus. And that's what makes it cool. That's their mystique.
I definitely like that the circus is coming back though. And just to kind of shift on what you were talking, like with like Viceland, bringing back King of the Road and everything, and now that's incorporating music into the show and all that. I think that's definitely a new platform to help these younger bands get out there. I don't know if you've been watching King of the Road at all.
Yeah, and there's this multimedia platform thing where everything's crossing through the different genres, which is amazing. And I think this is why bands need managers, because you can't know who to call to get on those things.
Yep.
You can't really solicit that stuff. You gotta know who to call. They gotta want to take that phone call. It's not somebody in a garage somewhere that's going to get that opportunity. They really need representation to get in there. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that one thing. We got a lot of bands that want to make it that listen to the podcast.
Yep.
How do you get someone to say, you're ready, it's time, we're ready to take you on and represent you, it's time to go from the garage to being pros. This isn't a hobby anymore. Let's do this. Because they need someone like you to do that. You get to be the guy that says, this could be real, not just a hobby.
Are you talking about necessarily for management, or are you talking about for booking, or just all of it?
Booking, record label. At some point, somebody has to invest not only their money, but their overhead and their time capital into an act.
I guess the problem with the young bands these days is they're having to do all of the work up front to prove that they will do the work, and then somebody picks them up. And I hate to like lump it in with everybody else, where it's like you get a submission for an artist that comes to you and they're like, oh, you know, we've got a record coming out, you know, we've got our first EP, we've got, you know, this, that, and the other thing, a music video made, and you look at it, and then, you know, to be judgmental, you look at how many Facebook likes they have, which Facebook means nothing these days anymore, which sucks to say, but it doesn't, you know, it's like, but you look at that and you're like, oh, 3,000 likes, I don't have time for this, you know.
But it does matter, right? I mean, Instagram matters, Facebook matters, Twitter matters. The fact that they've found people that are engaging them matters.
True, that does matter, but it also matters, like, to have a pumped up number. That's what gets people more excited about things, at least from what I've seen. Like, you take a band that has an incredible song that you find that has 300 likes on Facebook and like 20 followers on Instagram, but this song is amazing. it's going to be so difficult to get somebody to listen to you unless you absolutely know who these people are personally.
You know what's more entertaining to me is I'll find an act that's got like 1 million followers,
Mhm.
and then I'll mention it to Luke Pierce, and Luke will be able to tell if they're real followers or not.
Oh, yeah. You can always tell if they're botted followers. That's not a problem at all. But it's also...
I don't know how to do that, but Luke's a little more tech savvy than I am, and he's been very successful with the online stuff.
Mhm.
Home Free's numbers on YouTube are amazing.
Mhm.
So he's been able to figure out what's real and what's not. And that's amazing. People pay for
Oh, people pay for the YouTube clicks. You go on there and it's like you get somebody spinning it through, so you rack up your YouTube numbers, and then you get your big checks from Google. So
I guess if you can monetize it, it's great, but it seems a little artificial to me.
I mean, what's not artificial about being a YouTube star? Again, I have no disrespect for the YouTube stars. It's just getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to go on and talk about hating on some guy's girlfriend because whatever, and then you make 10 grand for a video that gets 1.2 million views, and it took you 10 seconds to make it. So
Literally working on a YouTube tour when you walked in.
I know. I mean, and the thing is, the YouTube tours are phenomenal because there's no show.
Well, that's not always the case. You take an act like Miranda Sings, where the show is amazing start to finish.
But then the majority of the YouTube tours are this. Like, we have one that we're working on in Europe right now, and it's actually going to go to Brixton, which is 5,000 seats, and it's going to sell out at 75 pounds a ticket, and they're only required to play 25 minutes because they don't actually have songs. What the actual show is the meet and greet part. You stand there for 3.5 hours, you wait in line, you get a high five, and that's it, because that's K-pop tours. But those are YouTube stars that do that stuff. But they'll sell out Brixton, which is crazy, and then they'll YouTube the video of their show that lasts 25, 30 minutes or whatever, and then they'll do like 5 million hits on that video. So all in all, they walk out of the room with $600,000 for 30 minutes of work.
No, the sensationalism of it all is amazing, and it's a new day. It's just a very new thing.
But that's the thing. Like, I was reading an article about it the other day. Is kids are polled, when they're kids, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the number one answer right now is a YouTube star, which is amazing. That's what kids want to be, as a YouTube star. But again, like when we were younger, everybody wanted to grow up and be like a fireman or an astronaut, or even when they were even younger, they wanted to grow up and be like a war hero or something like that. But now they want to be a YouTube star or an actor.
I always kind of wanted to grow up and be a fireman.
I don't ever want to grow up at all. So
Well said. All right, so band wants to get your attention. How do they do it?
I guess it's just about being persistent. Persistence is key. If you're going to submit one single lined email to me saying, I got a band, they're releasing a record, you should sign us and put us on tour, I'm not going to respond to that. If you're going to send me an email with a bunch of links and some history, like maybe a video of you at a show, of you performing, any other work that you might have done, great. I'll probably give it a look. But then if you send me like 2 or 3 follow-up emails, I'll be like, okay, this person probably wants to actually do this for a living and not just, an agent or a manager to get them out on tours. So
right. Let's talk about the middle of the country now. It's just like there used to be more independent promoters, and the consolidation of that's really affected things. Rock has always been an independent promoter's world, particularly in the club world. Are you finding less and less promoters out there buying those shows, or are they just a quiet minority out there that's still doing a ton of business?
At the club level, we're not really having a shortage of talent buyers, at least in the Midwest aspect of things, or even in the middle grounds.
And are those AEG Live Nation guys, or are those independents?
These are independents. Like AEG Live Nation, I know that from what I've heard, they're shifting gears to try and get into the 500 cap room realm, but AEG Live Nation is more where you bump into the 800 cap and above, or if you're looking at Full House of Blues tours, stuff like that, that's where you bump into those ones. At the club level, it's kind of hit or miss. Philadelphia's got some Live Nation presence out there at the club level, and there's a couple AEG clubs scattered throughout the country, and then I know St. Andrews in Detroit is now Live Nation. So they're all the way down to 400 cap, all the way up to, I think, like 1,500 cap or something like that. So, but most of the club level stuff, like 500 cap or even lower, is all independent buyer.
What are the things people should be looking out for next year that you think are going to be on? What would you predict is going to pop next year?
On my current roster, CKY is definitely going to have a resurgence.
You think?
Oh, absolutely. Like the fact that skate punk is becoming so full circle again. Like you're seeing an OFX or...
I love that strung out Pennywise Unwritten Law tour that Andy had out last year. It was like Return to My Youth.
That's what's happening now. Dropkick Murphys and all that stuff. That stuff's going to be touring like crazy, because I really think that the creation of Vice, the TV station, is bringing that whole skate culture back. Plus, with Kevin, he kind of reshifted the entire Warped Tour lineup, then now they're doing totally different stuff. You know, I mean, they're bringing back kind of the punk scene, and they have Gwar on Warped Tour this year. I mean, that's awesome.
You call it awesome. I say it's not Gwar without Dave Brockie.
It's never Gwar without Dave Brockie, yeah, believe me. But it's the fact that those names are out there touring again because the fans that are 35 years old, now they're bringing their kids to the shows. And Warped Tour was based off kids up until last year, and now they're trying to bring back the kids that started with Warped Tour 3 years ago or 22 years ago. When
Warped Tour is old enough to drink itself now. It's amazing.
It is, yeah, 21, yeah.
Very cool. Well, I can't think of a better place to end because that's so full circle right there. Thank you so much for taking the time, Trevor.
Hey, I love being here. Thank you.
Trevor is one of those guys that's got so much going for him in the industry. Glad to see that success has really caught up with him for all of his hard work.
Tim Borer from UTA on Promoter 101.
If you want to reach out to us, send us an email to steiny@promoter101.net.
On our next episode, Mac presents Marcy Allen. She will be discussing working sponsorship deals with everyone from the Foos to the Piano Man.
Also, not to be outdone, Paradigm's Kevin French is on top of his game, and he'll be joining us to talk about the National, Afghan Wigs, the Decemberists, Frightened Rabbits, Guster. Man, he's got an amazing amount of business going on, and he'll be here to talk about his early days and now his current leadership role at Paradigm. And until next week, we're wishing you nothing but sold-out shows for the week to come. Cheers.
It's Brian Jonas from High Road Touring, and I am on Promoter 101.